Why is it that meditation is so often revered as the secret to happiness? One can cite many reasons, many kind of spiritual reasons, such as understanding the self, releasing attachments, living more in the present moment, or recognizing one's divinity, one's connection with all of the universe. But today I want to talk about why meditation is the secret to happiness on a little more of a down-to-earth level. And I want to talk about a chemical known as dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, a brain chemical that's responsible for learning, memory, and pleasure. So whenever we're doing something that we're interested in, basically, whenever we find something interesting and we feel mentally engaged in it, dopamine is being released and we're paying attention to it. We're probably learning something. We're probably going to remember something from that experience because it's giving us pleasure. Remember, pleasure is an expansive experience. It's one that helps us to grow and learn. Often religious dogma tells us that pleasure is a bad thing, and in society there's sort of this like, pleasure is a bad thing, but we run towards pleasure. But on a biological level, pleasure helps us to grow and learn. But what happens, and maybe this is why there's so much dogma about it, is when we have an excess of pleasure, our brain gets flooded with dopamine. And that extra dopamine has to go somewhere. So normally what happens is the dopamine is released when we're engaged in something, like we're reading a book and we find it really interesting. Dopamine is being released. It's being released and it's being absorbed through dopamine receptors. They get filled and we feel pleasure. But when we have an excess of pleasure, when we have an excess of dopamine flooding our brain, the receptors get filled. There's only X amount of receptors, but maybe there's more dopamine. So the brain grows more receptors to take the extra dopamine. And that's when we feel like really excited about something. In fact, this is where a lot of addiction comes from. That so many dopamine receptors are created that the person feels like, it's so much fun. And then what happens when that dopamine is absorbed in the brain and that experience is no longer pleasurable? There is a bunch of empty receptors. And someone feels like, I need more of that pleasurable feeling. The one who's not dealing with addiction, that feeling of needing more is what we call boredom. So boredom is when the brain has empty dopamine receptors and we look for something to fill it. So we read the book again, or we watch the TV, or we scroll on the phone, and this releases dopamine in the brain. It's our reward center, and it gives us a feeling of pleasure, interest, attraction, enjoyment, something like this. So what does this all mean when it comes to the practice of meditation? Okay, so remember, when we have too many dopamine receptors and they're not being filled because our environment is not stimulating enough, we feel bored, we feel disinterested. And the only way to feel interested is to seek more and more stimulation. This is why scrolling on the phone can be so addictive. Because as we scroll and we see these images flashing, every click, every flash of an image is a dopamine is released in the brain. That's why you see people, they're sitting in a place where they need to be waiting, and it's so boring, it's so unbearable to wait that they pick up the phone and they start scrolling because it's this dopamine hit. And the sages of past would say that that's a terrible experience to be craving so much stimulation. I'm not trying to talk down on anybody that does that. I do it myself too. It's a part of our modern day society. But meditation has the cure for this. Because meditation, you've experienced now, we're on day 8, is very boring in some level. And that's because when we're meditating and we're just witnessing the breath, there is nothing that's giving us a hit of dopamine. There's nothing that's exciting or inherently interesting about watching the breath. And as we're doing that, we're starving our brain of dopamine. So just like someone who's fasting, if you eat a lot of food, you go to the buffet and you eat and your stomach is full like this, I ate so much, I'm so full. But when you digest that food and it passes, you feel more hungry, and then you got to eat more and more food. It's the same with dopamine. So when we do meditation, it's like doing a dopamine fast. We're putting ourselves in a space that is inherently not interesting, and we're giving our brain a chance to kind of purge those excess dopamine receptors. So by just sitting and witnessing the breath is boring, but that boring experience releases extra dopamine receptors. And what happens is when we finish the practice of meditation, we've got fewer dopamine receptors, which means it's easier to fill them. So just the littlest bit of stimulation can feel exciting, can feel more interesting. I give you an experience from my own life. Many years ago, I was living in Hong Kong, and I was living with a girlfriend, and she was working like 12-hour days, and I just sat at home all day with the dog. Hong Kong was super expensive. I didn't have any money to go out and do anything, so I really just sat in the house. I did nothing. Often I was scrolling on Facebook. I was trying to share some sort of inspirational stuff on Facebook, but that was it. And my job was to walk the dog. And I remember I would walk the dog, okay, I gotta walk the dog, and I go for this sort of like semi-frustrated walk around the neighborhood so the dog could go out. But I just felt like I was racing through it to get back to the house to really do nothing but sit and scroll my phone or watch something on the computer. This was the moment where I had like an awakening, and I started to do lots more meditation. I started to go into these meditation courses. I started reading about meditation, and I developed, just like I said in the last class, this building up of 5 minutes for 10 days, adding a minute. And I got to the point where I was meditating 20 minutes twice a day. And I noticed in just about 2 weeks of this practicing meditation regularly, when I took the dog for a walk after my meditation, instead of like kind of racing through it, huffing, puffing, frustrated, let's just finish this, I was looking around and I was looking at the leaves, and I forgot how beautiful leaves were. I just looked at the leaf, and like the veins on the leaves and the color, it seems so bright, it seems so attractive. This was my first-hand experience of what it's like to experience the world after a dopamine fast. Because when we give ourselves that moment of no interesting things, of just clearing the mind, everything is more interesting after that. So conversation with our lover is more interesting than after that. A meal tastes better. Just looking at the sky or the wall or the rocks on the ground, the texture starts to bring us pleasure. But when you compare it to scrolling, nothing brings as much dopamine as this device here. So to counteract the effects of this, meditation is really the truest secret to happiness. Because when we can find joy in the little things, it sounds so cliche, but finding joy in the little things is truly the secret to happiness, truly the secret to enjoying this life. So that's all I want to say about dopamine and meditation being the secret to happiness. If you're enjoying to share your practice with me, and maybe you want to go further on your practice, or you want to support me to continue sharing these teachings with the world, I recommend you to check out our membership, where you are not only supporting us, but you gain access to exclusive content, such as advanced practices and extended classes to help you take your yogic practice, your spiritual journey further. We love to support you, and we really appreciate your support back. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Now let's get ready to sit and do nothing together. We're going to meditate. We're going to meditate. So again, today we'll be practicing in Ardha Padmasana, the half lotus pose, if it's available to you. If not, find your way into any comfortable seated position, but we're going to find our way into meditation, coming into your position. If you're doing Ardha Padmasana, resting the foot on top of the thigh, making sure that knee is locked so you're not getting torsion in the knee, using a pillow for support if you need, making any final adjustments, sitting nice and tall, pressing the seat down, reaching the crown of the head up. Shoulders are back and down so the heart is open, relaxed. Close the eyes. Go inside. Take a deep inhalation through the nose. Then open the mouth side out. Oh, soften into the body, relaxing into the pose. Again, deep inhalation. Open the mouth side out. Oh, feeling those vibrations, massaging the nervous system, bringing you deeper into the present moment. One more time, deep inhalation. And side out. Oh. Sitting with the eyes closed, attention turned inside. Bringing all of your awareness to the tip of the nose. Concentrating on the natural flow of breath in and out through the nose. feeling the subtle sensations, tiny vibrations of the breath, entering and exiting at the tip of the nose or the upper lip. Allowing each breath to relax you deeper into the posture. Each breath turns the mind inward. Allow your mind to be fully concentrated on the sensations of the breath at the tip of the nose. And if you find you have a tendency to hold or control the breath at any point, control the breath in what feels like the most natural rhythm for you. And eventually you'll find yourself just witnessing. Breathing in and breathing out. Perform a posture check. Make sure you're not slouching, sitting nice and tall, and coming back to the sensations of the breath at the tip of the nose. Keeping the eyes closed and the attention turned inside. Slowly, with full awareness, make your way into the alternate meditation posture. finding comfort in the position and returning to witnessing the flow of breath at the tip of the nose. Relaxing with each breath, turning inward, witnessing the breath at the tip of the nose. Sitting with the eyes closed, attention turned inside, taking note of your state of being after the practice, how you feel in your body, emotions, mind. Tell yourself thank you for this time, effort, and energy. Focusing on your health, wellness, peace of mind, self-love. Take a deep inhalation into the heart. And as you exhale, gently coming back. So again, I can say thank you so much for joining me. Let me know in the comment section how it's going, if you happen to find Shiva in this episode. And if you have any questions, what you thought about today's lecture, I love to hear from you. So keep those comments coming and have a beautiful day. Namaste.